Willy Lott's Cottage, a scene of, I think, at least two or three John Constable's paintings, and painted by many artists over the years. Thanks very much to member Jez for the kind sharing of his image. And of course, as you many of you know, our monthly projects, I always choose one of your photos to do one of these monthly projects from. So keep them coming, all right, on our source library, our image sharing library. Keep them coming, and who knows, one of your photos may be a topic for a future monthly project. So it's Willy Lott's Cottage, and well, a few objectives here. We did discuss on the recent Pat Chat our regular monthly online, or one of our regular monthly online get-togethers, how we might approach this, how I might approach this. I think the first thing is the actual orientation. Are you going to go landscape or vertical? We did actually discuss someone going vertical. That'd be quite nice, actually. The side of the cottage and the reflection, an option. I'm going to go horizontal with this one, but we want to try and capture the atmosphere of this sort of quaint, quiet, rural scene. Capture the light. So look at where the light is falling. Look at where the shadows are. There's sort of quite a soft light in places on the photo, but then up on the chimney there's quite a hard shadow, quite a dark shadow up there, quite a soft shadow there, a darker shadow up there. So just take it all in, spend a few minutes just gathering your thoughts about where the light's coming from, and there's kind of atmospheric conditions, this sort of diffused light in places, and this quite peaceful scene. Next, we want to explore textures and surfaces, the building itself, the smooth walls, the tiling on the roof, all the foliage, the calm water conditions, all sorts of different surfaces that we can explore with different watercolor techniques, different brushes, different watercolor techniques like wet on wet or glazing or dry brush and so on. So we'll be hopefully covering a few of those. We want to create a little bit of depth in this and perspective. The photograph is taken from one side of the river, and it sort of curves around, as you can see. But maybe creating that depth, thinking about these trees as objects, simplify the objects, and then have them sort of create that sense of distance by overlapping these different objects as we go into the background. For example, if I try and simplify it, we got a tree there, or maybe there's another bush there, a bush here, a bigger tree there. In the middle, we've got a tree there, a tree here, a less dense tree there, some distant trees there, another tree there, a lighter bush or tree there, and then a little bit more difficult with the grasses and rushes going along the stream, but you can definitely see, for example, here, there's a bit of a clump there, all right, in front of that, and then maybe another one there, another one here, a couple of nearby ones as well. So think of these, simplify these objects and have them cascading into the distance there. We've got lots of lush green foliage. I think this photo was taken in August one year, maybe in fairly recent years. Excuse me. So we've got to think of those greens, all right? Mixing some convincing greens for the trees, the grasses, the duckweed going over, floating, could be water lily pads. I think this is more like sort of like a floating weed in a way, but they're all different shades of green there. And yes, I touched on exploring different brushwork and watercolor techniques, and really at the end of it, you don't need to follow me. As I was saying to someone today, someone that did a line and wash, you don't need to do it in my style. If you want to go line and wash or a different style, as long as it includes the watercolor medium. That's great. You know, you interpret this in your own way. All right, let me just describe my materials to you. I'll remove that eraser. My paper of choice is Saunders Waterford. This is cold press, 300 grams, 15 inches by 11 inches. Paints are from Mark Japman in the UK, Japman's Art Materials. So I've got neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre. I will describe this as I go through the painting process with you. Spring green, might be using that a fair bit, and that viridian green as well. Cobalt green, yeah, might be using that as well. Cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson. I think that's cadmium red. Looks like a bit of blue has been splattered on it. We've got English oxide or light red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, and there's a few sort of gouache. Well, there's a couple of gouaches on the right. White gouache, Naples lemon light gouache there. Quinacridone gold, probably won't be using that, and a lavender. All right, ignore that one. Few mixing wells, brushes. I'm going to be using a medium mop brush with a good point and good paint holding capability, and then maybe a smaller synthetic brush and a little rigger brush as well. Right, plan for this. Well, get in my mind right the horizon. So the horizon is going to be just above the center line. We want to give ourselves enough space for the reflection of the cottage and a little bit of, for context purposes, the grasses here in the foreground. Not too interested in the sky. The sky looks all right. It's actually the sky is a little bit like that Malta harbour that we did the other day. For those that did that one, where you've got these clouds and they're sort of getting smaller in the distance. Another feeling of depth in there. So you might want to do that. I'm going to go for a simpler sky for this demonstration. So I'm not going to bother really with clouds. And there is a little bit of perspective here with the rooftop. That one, a little bit. So it's sloping down left to right. This one's sloping, it's almost horizontal, but it is going up just ever so much. That one is sloping that way. That pretty much is your eye level. There is a figure there. I don't think I'm going to include a figure, just have that light bit of the lane. So think shapes here with the foliage, think shapes, all right? To try and simplify the scene for you. Right, so drawing-wise, I'm going to start with a 3B pencil and get right in my mind the placement of the building first, but trying to imagine the whole scene on the paper so that I am not sort of cutting things off. I've got enough space for the reflections. As I said, the horizon is a little bit above the that center line there, and then the cottage is going to be sort of around about that area. If you imagine that's the cottage, and then the reflection is going to be sort of. Well, let's actually move the cottage over a little bit. Thinking about the right-hand side there, just a little bit over that center line, okay? So I need to maybe about there. Yeah. So that's an important edge there. And actually, it's a little bit of a lean of the side of that roof, the side of the wall. It's not vertical. It does lean a little bit like that. And of course, the reflection, it likewise going to reflect that angle. Yeah. So, and the reflection is going to be something like that. The waterline somewhere there. All right, let's get serious then with the drawing of the building. And then I'll draw in some simple shapes, some simple outline shapes for the tree. Keep it simple, okay? Right, let's start with the angle of the roof. And this is probably the most important thing to get right, this building, because this is what it's all about, Willy Lott's cottage. And the ridge of the roofs don't need to be completely straight. I can see a bit of a wonky line on this one, for example. That goes. It sort of takes a little bit of a dip, then it rises and it dips again. Gives it a bit of character, doesn't it? And then the all-important right-hand side there. Oh, I've come over a little bit. Let's just rub that out. Come over a little bit, that's all right. And the slope down. Chimney. And then the sort of brickwork of the chimney breast, which I know some of you may not want to do. This, it's quite distinctive in many of the paintings of this cottage. You do see this brickwork here. I guess it's quite unusual to see that like that exposed on the exterior of the building. Now, there's a little extension that comes out. So bush there. That's the water's edge. And then that, so that distance there is going to be equal for the reflection. Main chimney. There's a brightly lit side to it. And then a darker shady side. So that's in the shade. Dark shadow going up the roof. That roof sort of continues. It continues to about there, doesn't it? Just continue on these reflections, right? Chimney there to about there. So that right-hand side comes down to there. That's the shady side. I'm going to draw in the little shapes of the duckweed as well in the drawing, just so that I've got I'm planning it in my own mind where these lighter areas are going to be. So there's 1, 2, there's a third one here. A bit more dense there because it's a little bit more, they're closer together, but as we come to the foreground, they're a little bit less dense, a little bit less condensed. Excuse me. Right. The water's edge with these grasses. Again, just think shapes. There's that kind of rounded bunch of grasses there. There's another one there. Go over. There's a light lane here, and then there's a bush there framing the left hand side. There's a tree, distant trees, and then left of the building there's a tree like that. Of course, with these trees you can move them around a bit if you want to change the composition. I mean, they are transitory things. They're going to be changing over time, aren't they? Let's get this main one. And there's quite a nice, with this main, I'll call this the main tree. That main tree there's got quite a nice brightly lit tree trunk that's also got a bit of reflection like the building. So that's quite a nice feature to have in as well. So that tree is going to be, let's put that in there. This is actually quite dark. That there is quite dark. It's one of the darkest areas of the whole scene. That's dark in there. That's dark. And tree trunk. And of course, the reflection. There are a few more tree trunks that we see going down the river, but keep it simple. A little bit of light in a few places down the river. Now, the background trees, we'll keep them simple. Maybe go cooler there for these distant trees. Don't want to bring them too far forwards. And the bush on the right-hand side, brightly lit. Darker water here. Okay, duckweed, this floating weed. As I say, thinking about the shapes of this duckweed, and so near the cottage. Well, let's just get right. Let's get right that water's edge first of all. Right, that's my water's edge. Clump there, clump there, clump there. Different grasses there. So I have that fairly light there. So that's light green. And then the next band is going to be, we've got that reflection of that roof. So there, to there, about that. Yep, so the next bit of duckweed can sort of go, we can make up the shape. You can see with the shape of my my pencil, that's the kind of edge I've got there. Now the last one in this bottom right corner, and almost connecting with that one, a little bit less dense. We can see a little bit of the sky piercing through as well. Well, there you are. 1, 2, 3. This is quite bright there. That's quite bright there with the grasses. Got to make sure I make that light. It's dark behind, which kind of accentuates the light of this grassy area. Not going to have that figure. Oh, it's almost a figure there. Should I have a figure? Oh, done one now. There we are. There's a figure. An accidental figure. Right. Final details of the building. We've got to get this right. There's a bit of timber there. Window there. Funny sort of very light window here. Window there. There's another one. Ground floor window there. Bit of a bush here. Right, that area there is going to be quite light, so I need to make sure it's nice and clean. So my rubber. I might even leave that sort of unpainted. Because my paper's not bright white, it's sort of a creamish, off-white. I might be able to just add in a very, very thin wash. All right, that's my drawing done. Does it sort of look all right from a point of view of the perspective? Yeah, we've got to check it first to make sure it looks all right. Oh, chimney here. Make sure that brightly lit, that brightly lit side is there, and we've got that funny kind of chimney breast coming down. It's not actually in the dead centre of that end. All right, are there any questions at all? Let me just check the old questions. No, I don't think there's any questions. Well, I assume you're all understanding things so far and following me in this process. All right, painting. Let's lay down a wash, basically covering the whole scene, all right? And the base wash, which will be the eventual colour, the end colour of the sky, the lighter parts of the building, that lane on the left, the reflection of the building, the greenery of the floating weed, 1, 2, 3, and just some basic greens. I've got to cover this area with some basic greens. Might leave a few little areas here not showing, excuse me, but basically covering the whole paper, all right, with the biggest brush for the size of the paper. And for me, this is a sort of medium-sized brush. I tend to alternate between, well, this is a new Tintoretto, or I've got a Da Vinci, similar size, almost identical there, or a natural, more of a natural squirrel mop brush. That would be okay as well. Let's go with the Tintoretto. All right, Simple Sky. Simple Sky. And for that Simple Sky, a little bit of cerulean, a little bit of cobalt blue. Not too dark. And the way I'm applying those brush marks, that can give perhaps the impression of a few of those clouds as well that I said I wasn't going to include, but with these sort of brush marks, it can give the impression of those sort of fair weather clouds. Don't be concerned with going over the edges of different objects. Maybe a little bit stronger. A little bit stronger. So not much water, same mix, cobalt blue, cobalt blue and cerulean blue. Just, dabbing, basically. Don't overdo it. I'm on the verge of overdoing it there. Right, next. A pale yellow for the building, really light. Make sure I've got no blue on my brush, otherwise I'm going to end up with a green. So a bit of yellow, maybe a bit of gouache white, a bit of white paint, bit of yellow. That might give us a bit more yellow. And the path on the left, it's a sort of almost like a sand colour. Let's get in some base greens. I've got a spring green here, a bit of Viridian green, just to take the edge off, just to cover up the paper so I don't have all that blank paper. Going with a cool green for the background trees. The ultramarine blue. Frisian green. A little bit of red. Ultramarine blue. Frisian green. Needs to be a bit stronger. Bit of burnt umber. These are the background trees. I want to keep them fairly cool. Soft edge. Down to the water's edge in the distance there. We'll go a little bit darker in there. All right, continue with the greens. I want to make sure that is light. Slopey bit of the building. And down to the water's edge. We'll be going over this again. Up to the, or down to the ridge of the roof. Down the left-hand side. Try and keep a straight edge for that. And a bit of brighter green for that bush. Paint around the figure. Okay, we're almost coming down to the water. Bright bush on the right hand side. Certainly bright on the top there. Right, the colour of the duckweed, the colour of the reflection of the buildings, a little bit darker than there. And the sky as well. So let's go in with a sort of mid-green for this duckweed. I'll just continue over to the right hand side. Little slither of light showing through the distance, the river as it goes into the distance. Right, more duckweed. Loosely following my outline of that weed. In fact, all of this can be green. Because we are going to be painting light to dark, so it's quite pale there. And little bits of duckweed there. Right, colour of the reflection of the lighter parts of the building. So there and there. It's going to be a little bit of, actually let's go with a yellow ochre. Not too strong. Of course, it will dry lighter. Bit of the sky. Follow the line of the roof. So it's a little bit darker than the sky, this reflection of the sky. Now within this area, we can see a little bit of the sky reflected. So just dropped in a little bit of blue in there. We're getting some soft edge, it doesn't matter. And let's just finish up with a little bit of green over these, just base colour, just to cover the paper. So I'm using this spring green with the viridian green, so that the spring green would be too bright. Go a bit cooler, less severe with the mixture of the viridian green. So I think that is about it on the initial drawing. Where I am is quite humid at the moment, so it's taking a long time to dry, which is all right. That can be sometimes a good thing. Right, next. Let me just see if there's any questions. Okay. Don't think there's any questions, are there? No, any comments, questions, anyone, before I start the next phase? Okay. All right, please remember to pop questions into the questions section, not into the general chat. I won't be able to see it there. Right, next step. Gradually now, getting a little bit darker. Actually, that's quite a bright roof there, but I'm going to put in the base color of the rooftops and the shadier parts of the building there, and then the trees. All right. By which time, hopefully, this would have dried here. Doesn't matter if it takes a longer time. Right. The roof. Let's try a bit of cadmium orange. Brighten things up a bit. And a bit of light red. Down to the roof and chimney. And then a little bit of roof the other side, and we'll go over that one again. Then the brightly lit side of the chimney. It comes down. And this lean-to roof as well. Leave a little bit of light There's a little slither of light there, and also on the top of that roof as well. We need to remember to paint around those, so we're giving that little bit of light. So of course, have a brush with a good point to it, good edge as well. Okay. Now, shadier part of the building, which is going to be let's go a little bit yellow ochre, little bit of neutral tint. And see what that is. It actually is quite, even though this is in the shade, it's still quite light compared to that. You see the difference there? That's really light. That's really light. But these shadier walls aren't too dark. So just be careful with that. A tiny bit of neutral tint. Might be a bit too light. Go a bit cooler. In places. So I just picked up with that blue there on the palette. And right, shadow. Going across here, and we've got, it rises up that way, and there's a bit of a chimney or something there. In fact, that is the same value as well. That needs to be roof. Okay, that's two. Just that's too dark there, so I'm just going to lift it off with a paper tissue. There we go. All right. Next will be the background trees, okay? Starting from the left, going over to the right, those background trees. And that's going to start to give some form to the building, because they're going to be going dark in places. So that will just give it a bit of sort of contrast in the values, bigger range of values to kind of create a bit more impact and the form of the building a bit more with that shadow around it. I'll keep with the same brush here, starting, as I say, from the left. Oh, I think there's a question. Hang on a second. Right, question from Sudaka. How do you deal with sharp dry edges when a new wash meets the dry edge using the approach you have demonstrated, overlaps? Well, you can go over it again if you have that nasty edge, or you could do a bit of lifting off if that's the case. I know what you mean when, where can I see one here? But I mean, I guess over here, we've lost that edge over there. When I apply the next the next layer, then hopefully I should obliterate any imperfections there, Siddhartha. Okay. All right. Don't think there's any more questions. Right. Trees. Try not to make them too perfect. Have some sky piercing through and think about the edges of the trees as well, and their form. Yeah, not too symmetrical. Light coming from the right, so generally darker on the left. Dark there. And as we negatively paint around some of these shapes, we are, think about those overlapping shapes again. Hopefully we will get the feeling of depth in the scene and a little bit more of an atmosphere and impact with these shadows. Now this tree on the left, sorry, it's actually it's quite yellow in places. So that's probably what Siddhartha means, that dark line there, where I've gone in with quite a weak wash on top of a darker wash. You get that border, but we're going to go a bit darker, thicker on top of that. Right. Virgin green, burnt umber. Not too much. Burnt umber. And just looking at the form of this tree and these sort of branches just curling up. And it goes a little bit darker immediately on the left. And even sometimes I think quite effective, just have a little bit of foliage outside of the area of the canopy, just gives a little bit of extra sort of movement and to it. Going a little bit darker places. Don't overdo it. Those on the left, all right. It's sort of fairly. It's fairly basic. Don't get too detailed with it. Right. Bush on the left, partly in shade. Partly in shade, and now this tree and the hedge looks like a high hedge behind it, painting around this one, painting around that one as well. That's too cool. Virgin green, burnt umber. Try and go over my pencil lines as well. Now darker, so a little bit of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, Virgin green, and this light bush here on the left. Paint around that. Let's go a little bit cooler. Now it does need to be dark in here. Virgin green, burnt umber. Now a little bit of paint around. This light bush here. Darkness on the left-hand side of that tree. And paint around that accidental figure I put in, around the head. You probably can't, you probably can't see it, but there we go. Now, bit of darkness to this bush on the left-hand side of the cottage. Quite dark underneath the bush as well. There we are. So that's hopefully getting a little bit of form to that left-hand side with those values, and hard and soft edges, all right. Don't go in too heavy-handed with the dark. Okay, over to the middle now, middle background trees. Basically, as I did before, thinking about the shape of these trees. Different brush marks. Main tree. We can see a little bit of sky through the uppermost parts of the tree. And there's a bit of light catching this right hand side. So it's going with a brighter green in places. And then darker, Viridian green, burnt umber, bit of neutral tint or cobalt blue if I want to. Just add another dimension to those darks. Right, bit of careful painting around now that ridge of the roof of the cottage. And let's get a good point on this brush. I think it's losing a hair there. Right, down that side. Down to the roof. And then other side, hard edge. Burnt umber, Viridian green, and probably a little bit thicker in consistency to that lighter green. Right, the all-important right-hand side of the cottage. Drop in a little bit of blue there to just create a little bit of extra impact. Paint around the left-hand side of that tree trunk, and then the right-hand side. Down to the river bank. Now, these distant trees, I don't want to go over them too much. I do want to try and make sure they are sufficiently cool to push them back. So I'm just really laying down some paint and then just lifting it off with a finger to get that soft edge. In fact, there's not too much water on my brush now. And I'm able to create some dry brush marks there. Just go back into this tree here. Right, where was I? Dry brush marks. Okay, we're coming down to the water now. Water's edge on this right-hand side. And just complete the darker part of that bush on the right-hand side. And then it's really dark in the river here, with the exception of those little bits of light that are coming through there. Maybe there's a gap in the trees there and it's creating that nice, quite attractive gap there. Right, are there any questions? Dom, when you that made me laugh. Dom, when are you going to come and paint the scene for real? That'd be lovely. It's the opposite side of the country for me, Dom. Although I did drive past there the other week when I went to Harwich. Yes, love to. Best I can do, best a lot of us can do, is painting from this lovely photograph of Jess's. Right, finger job again. Let's just soften that up. And like the left-hand side, not too much detail because it's on the side. And again, the distance in the distance there. We don't want to get too bogged down with any of the detail. Right, I think that's pretty much the background trees done. Got to paint in a little bit more of a dark rooftops here. Let me do that next. Get rid of the green on my brush. And something quite darker now, darker roof colour. So that light red, bit of ultramarine blue. And I've got to be careful here. Doing a good job, hopefully doing a good job for the cottage, because it is quite a well-known cottage, and people looking at it will say, "Ooh, something's not quite right." Right, careful, paint the side of the chimney. And even that's not square, just sort of widen out to the base. And the shadow. bit darker with the shadow. Actually, that shadow is darker than that side of the chimney. We're now going to go up onto this roof again, and the left-hand side of the chimney down to the ridge of the extension. Leave that little slither of light, and this roof as well. We'll put a bush in front of that to obliterate it a bit more. There's a line there, and there's a line there, and then there's a line there, there, there. Let's get these windows in. Let's make this window a little bit darker. Artist privilege. And a dark window there. Don't worry about the colour, just think about the value. Use the fingers again just to merge things along. This light here of the ridge, it would continue along, but then of course the shadow of the chimney will create a little bit of a shadow there, so that's why that lightness will stop. And the value of that is similar to the value of that. If you look at the picture, if this was black and white, there'd be very similar values there. Okay. Right, so shall I do the water's edge first or the water? I think I will do the bushes. Let's do the bushes on the left. Do the bushes on the left. Let me just see if there's any questions. Jada, how do you keep up the energy? keep hydrated. And a strong coffee as well before I start. There you are. That's how I keep going. Thanks very much, Jada. Right. Grasses, rushes on the left-hand side. That grass. Now, I am going to put in quite a dark colour in areas here, and you will notice that some of the blades of these grasses, they're quite light. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to, when it's dry on the side, when the dark areas are dry, I'm going to go in with a little rigger brush and some white gouache, maybe tainted with a little bit of green, of red and green maybe, just to get in those little flicks. There's quite a lot of vertical little curves and verticals, or this horizontal explosion of foliage there, to get the effect of that. All right, so maybe not traditional watercolor, I'm afraid, but it works for me. Right, well, I did some bushes over here. Where am I mixing my greens? Ooh. Come on, Tim, get the brush clean first. Now, some of this some of these grasses over here, we can just about make out a little bit of darkness in some of those little blades of grass, just between the blades of grass. There we are. This is quite dark. It's sort of all in the shade, what it isn't over here. In fact, that should be more in the shade there. There's a bit of a shadow going across from the cottage, and maybe some softer shadows going over the lane as well. Yeah, so this is a lot in the shade over here, particularly there in that middle. All right, dark green then. Viridian green. A little bit of my spring green. Stick with this brush. So from the water's edge, and I don't know if you can see that, but I haven't got a perfect edge to my brush. Hopefully that will give us the impression of that foliage. There's my waterline there. And very dark for this tree that's just in front of the cottage, almost on the water's edge. Don't go too dark, don't overwork it. Light. Continue on. Again, like the tree shape, don't make it too perfect, all right? These bushes are different shapes and sizes. Now as we come over to the left, we're getting a bit more vibrant with the green, and we lose that darkness. And down to the water's edge. Now a little bit more vibrant with the greens now. There's that bush there. We're mentioning about these overlapping shapes, trying to get the feeling of depth in the painting. Connect with that left-hand side with the sort of flower heads of the grasses. There's another bush there. Maybe going a bit darker at the base. Now, coming around to the left, I've got some really light blades of grass that are showing up against a darker background. Let's go in with a darker green down there. So we'll be going over, ooh, picked up too much there, and we'll be going over this with a lighter colour, that's a body colour. Right. These blades in the immediate foreground, I'm going to do with this rigger brush in the end, but let's now do the river. The river, soft, quite soft over here, soft reflections. Slightly more defined, harder reflections here. Look at the blades of grass, they really are showing up. So over on the right hand side here. Ooh. Forgot the lightness of the trunk. Doesn't matter. We would get that back. And now just some base green. Down to the edge of the duckweed. Just form that edge there. And then I need to go in a lot darker. So let's go Virgin Green, and this could be thicker. Virgin Green, neutral tint. Payne's Grey, we haven't got neutral tint, all right? Something dark, a dark, very dark green. So it's quite a soft edge there, and there's do you see these sort of soft, almost like vertical, soft, darker marks, giving quite a nice look over there. And this is really dark on this right-hand side. Very dark. Don't go black though. Put a bit of blue. And then we're meeting the duckweed. I'm afraid to use the fingers again. See if I can just get a little bit more light over there. Don't want to cover up that lighter area. Right, just continue with a little bit more of this dark green stuff on this right hand side. Time-wise, hopefully I should be completed within half an hour, if that's okay with you. Let's go with a lighter green now for this middle area. There's the reflection of the side of the cottage. Mixing a lot of green tonight. So just observe the duckweed and how it's got within it just little tiny sort of horizontal streaks where there's a gap in the weed. But trying to now create these three main patches. The middle bit here, where we got the darker reflection of those grasses. And we sort of go up to that chimney breast with a bit of darkness like that. I do need to create the other side of the chimney there. Right. A few little bits and pieces in there. Oh, we've got a bit of over on the far water's edge. It does go again quite dark over there. So this is where a good edge comes in handy. Hopefully it's beginning to look a little bit more like a cottage in a rural scene now. get some darks in there, and some darker bits in there, and darker bits there. All right, I need to do the reflection of the side of the room. Let me just use a different brush. That brush, the brush I was using is so dirty now. So we've got the reflection of the end of the house. And then the roof. Not too dark. Dark side of the chimney. Have a little bit of a reflection. Soften up that edge. And this needs to be dark here. To the left of the reflection. That's the reflection of that tree. Just a few little marks again in that duckweed, just to make it a bit more convincing. Some darker bits to the far water's edge, just where it meets the water. Right, while that's drying, let's do this figure. Stick with this brush. Face, arms. Should we keep the figure light? I think it'll work quite well. Let's keep the top light and the bottom a bit darker. And a little soft reflection. Yeah, maybe a bit too hard, but there we are. A accidental figure. What else? What else? I've got to do the reflection of the chimney. So can I go darker over there? Just a little bit more to this duckweed. Don't want to overdo it, otherwise it's going to be too busy. That's a reflection of the shadow there. All right, I think it's time for, right, last stage now, getting in these darker blades of grass and the lighter blades of grass. Let me just check if there's any questions. Ollie, what is the brush you are using again? Does a great, this one is a Tintoretto. I've just got it, but it's started to lose some hairs out in the middle, which is a bit concerning to me. I shall report on that on later demos. This is a can you see that? Tintoretto 1407 Sintetico Vaggio Kazan, Italy. I think sold by a number of a harder wearing brush is, in my opinion, is the Da Vinci Cassagno. And this is a new one, but this replaced one I had for about a year, and it kept its point. Probably only lost about one or two hairs, but the points eventually do kind of blunt, with doing that in the palette, and so you do lose it in the end. Sadaka, what's a good rule for the color value of a reflection compared to the object? Is this the same where the reflection is in light or in shadow? Ooh, it's difficult. It's generally going to be darker, but if it's black, it's going to be a little bit lighter. All right, but generally with these lighter values, the reflection is going to be a bit darker. The side of my house there, I could have gone lighter there. My house looks like it's gone a bit green. But yeah, that's probably about the right value there. That, darker than that. Sky, darker than that. All right, that's generally the rule. And question from Jada, how wet was, in brackets, the paper you were doing chimney reflection? It was, that chimney is actually quite dry, Jada, okay? You can see there with a hard edge. I don't know whether you can see that clearly, but there's a hard edge there. There might be a little bit of residual moisture in the paper. So it hasn't, I can tell, because it's still a bit buckled, the paper, not dry. So, yeah, maybe a tiny bit of dampness in there. All right, grass time, and then we are done. Let's start with these darker grass here. I'm going to rig a brush. There's a Levinson brush here. It's actually quite good. This one's, I've had this about 3 or 4 years, this brush, and it's never lost any hairs. Right, something dark, Virgin Green, and neutral tint. Now, needs a bit more wash on it than that. Bit more water. That's better. So don't have these too perfect, these blades. Maybe some have got a little bit of a curve on them. They cross over, some thick, some thin, and some bent. All right. And I think that, don't overdo it on that foreground. Maybe just when I've got this dark colour, just a little bit of darkness, these dark blades, just in a few little places. All right, now for the lighter grass. So same brush, need to do that reflection. Bit of white gouache, bit of yellow ochre, and that reflection will be too dark. The reflection will be right about there. And we do see a little bit of the tree trunk. Disappearing and emerging in the canopy. Just a little bit. All right, that's enough. Hopefully that will look like a convincing reflection there. Right. So, Virgin Green. I'll wash my palette off later on. I'm just contaminating my lovely white paint with that Viridian Green to get this sort of lighter, cooler. And then just get the right amount of thickness there, and just in places there's these lighter marks. Needs to be lighter. Be a bit of spring green with that. And so these lighter blades coming over that darker area. My paint's a little bit too dry. It's particularly effective in the darker areas, you see. Not to overdo it. I think is that enough? Maybe a little bit more down here. Just a few more. There's a little bit of light actually hitting. Just a little bit of light hitting that far right hand side. You've got to know when to stop. The more you look at the photo, the more details you pick up. Individual blades of grass. Yeah, so know when to stop. All right, am I done? Let's just have a quick review. Right, that's enough. Put this pen down. Put this brush down. Okay, so Willy Lott's Cottage. Just have a recap. An exercise in trying to portray a tranquil scene, doing justice to the architecture, this old cottage, which must be, 400 or 500 years old, something like that, and the scene of many John Constable paintings. A very popular place to visit, and yes, you're trying to do justice to the scene and trying to get a sense of depth as well, lighter value for the distant trees, softer edges, the succession of bushes going down the scene, and the tranquility with the water, trying to be true to the reflections as well, and then these little sort of horizontal bands of duckweed, just adding another dimension to that water, making it just a little bit more interesting. Simple sky, although I did with my brush strokes. I didn't lay down my wash like that, horizontal lines on a board that slopes. I was daubing the paper. It wasn't pre-wet, and you just hopefully ends up with the effect of those sort of soft, high altitude clouds. So there we are. I can muck about with a little bit more. Could I just add a little bit of highlight to this guy or woman or whatever? Maybe a bit of highlight to the figure. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that demo, and I will catch up you on the next event soon.